Dark by Paul L. Arvidson. Narrated by Benjamin Fife. Title music by Nina West. This is Lieutenant Myrch Weston, service number NXBF-105345-GDT. Not that that matters overmuch now. I'm the last of the mission to Deep Space Colony Sirius 4, though the natives here call it Dark. Excerpts from Distress Beacon SN-185-3001. Found by ESV Vixen, Terra date 2610-2225. For Cheryl, Leah, and Nenna. Chapter 1. Dunn sat bolt upright in the darkness, eyes open, heart battering. He could still feel it coming. Churning cold metallic water, spray everywhere, his sinews twanged tight, heart banging, ears singing. At least that's blocking out the sound of... What? What is it? What in the gods is it? It's coming, still coming. It's like it's a hunger. Driven. Want and hate, blood and bone. Closer. Closer and... He inhaled a final struggling breath and shoved the horror in his head away. He could hear his brothers and sisters making small stirring noises not far from him. He hoped he hadn't woken Mother, too. He'd never hear the end of it. Since Father had disappeared, Mother had changed. Not close to him, not warm. He'd become the man of the family, and that was that. He still felt too young, but what could he do? Someone had to hunt and forage while Mother cared for the little ones, and he was the eldest. And now he was waking everyone more nights than not, with these blasted dreams. All that was familiar trickled into his brain. His bed of reeds underneath him, the drone of the fans, and the warm mammalian smell of his family. A new span in the dark. Time to wake up. The nightmares took longer to shake off. He dreamed of something pursuing him through tunnels, his calves deep in water. It was something horrible hunting him down. He ran and ran until his lungs felt like rags. Then, of course, as it got to him, he'd wake up. Every time he tried to get back to sleep, there it would be again, waiting. He sighed. There was no telling Mother about his dreams. One day Father had gone out and had never come back, just like that. It was like he'd ceased to exist. Once Father's smell had faded from their home, it grew harder and harder to remember he had ever been there. Thinking about Father always made him feel a sharp sadness, even though it had happened 2 ages ago. Mother had pined, of course, crying at night once she knew the babies were asleep. Hearing her weep in the darkness, Dunn knew he'd be growing up faster than his friends. He couldn't talk to most of them about his concerns, except Padge. The others were busy playing and chasing each other as if nothing had happened. For them, nothing had. Padge, though, he had his own responsibilities. Being the son of the shaman could do that. They'd known each other since they'd been the 2 youngest pups in the village. Padge had always been the most worldly of all their group. Not averse to getting into trouble with the rest of them, but certainly averse to getting caught. He'd saved them all from many a beating. Now, with Father gone, it felt to Dunn like Padge was the only one he could talk to. Odd. The sense of responsibility Dunn felt he'd had thrust upon him, Padge had been born with. After breakfast and helping Mother feed the little ones, Dunn went out, slamming the rush door behind him. He walked to the wooden span across the massive river pipe, the crossing that gave the bridge folk their name. From there, it was easy to follow the rope path to the village. He needed to reach the shaman's compound on the opposite side of the village if he wanted to talk to Padge about why he'd been feeling so odd. Out of the burrow, he was enveloped by the hum of smell and noise from the village. Some kind of auction of a new piece of found tech seemed to be taking place in the market. He heard raised voices oddly. Usually trading in Bridgetown was a good-natured affair. He couldn't process any of it today. It was all he could do to follow the rope guides underfoot, without walking into anything. His head buzzed. He was relieved to finally reach the woven gate, and the wisps of incense and worked wood told him he'd reached his destination. "Dunno," was all his friend could muster after Dunn retold his dream. "Well, thanks for that. Great help." "I mean, it might be something. It might be nothing." "Somehow none of today is working out how I'd planned," Dunn sighed. A breeze outside stirred the wooden wind chimes beside the lean-to shed Padge used as his workshop. Dunn stretched out his arm to feel along the rack that held his friend's work in progress. He felt twisted bamboo staves that would be made into sword spears, preferred weapon among the bridge folk. A shup, shup, shup sound indicated Padge had resumed working with sanding the sword spear at his bench. The sword was made out of the extremely hard, woody stem of one of the larger fungi growing in the depths. It didn't stay sharp for very long, but long enough. The hunters usually carried 2 or 3 strapped to their backs for good measure. Padge carved particularly well. He was especially good at forming the helical twist in the shaft of the weapon that made it fly true when thrown. "Padge, hello?"
"Hush, I'm sanding."
"Oh." The rhythm of the sanding was a reassuring odd kind of tune, with the wooden, just musical clunking of the chimes.
"Padge?" "Sanding. Tricky. Needs concentration."
"Sorry, it's just—" The sanding block clattered to the floor.
"Right. I give up," Padge said. "Grab a rod from the rack. There's some scraps in the bucket. You need something to occupy your hands."
Fishing was always Padge's go-to in a crisis. They left through the back flap of Padge's workshop and headed to his favorite spot, a rusted-through hole at the top of the massive pipe. They scrambled up the side using massive bolt heads in the metal surface of the pipe as a makeshift ladder. Once at the top, they gathered their kit, baited the long lines necessary to get down far enough, and let each one fall through the hole with a satisfying plop. They fished for a while in companionable silence. A lazy breeze, scented faintly with vinegar, drifted up through the hole.
"Detail!"
Padge cried suddenly. "Eh?" Dunn cocked his head, bewildered.
"Detail, my friend. That's what was bothering me."
"Good, I'm glad. Care to tell me why?"
"Your dream. Most people's dreams are vague, full of confused smells, feelings, sometimes sounds. You know, the I was there with my friend, but it was really my sister, and then the tunnel became my house kind of thing. Yours felt like you were there."
"You can say that again," Dunn said.
"Maybe you were."
"What do you mean?"
"Just what I said. Maybe you were there. Or at least maybe you will be."
"You're talking in riddles."
"Might be I'm not explaining it right. Listen, Dad talks about this kind of stuff all the time. You sit around and hear enough of it, and you kind of get a feel for it. Let's go back and find him. I think he'll be able to help. Besides, the fishing's rubbish today."
Chapter 2. "Do you know what foretelling is, Dunn?" The voice of Barg the shaman was deep and reassuring. Dunn guessed that came with the job. "No." Dunn, Padge, and his father enjoyed the warmth of the small air vent in the hut. Many of the shared buildings and all homes had a vent somewhere. They all came out of the ground or walls and delivered air in varying temperatures and smells, ending usually in a metal grill or mesh. The vent in Barg's floor had the unusual combination of warm airflow and no smell other than a slight tinge of metal. This allowed Barg to place bags of herbs on the grill, which, warmed by the airflow, would permeate the hut. Dunn felt wrapped in perfume, the sweet and the spicy, the nutty and the resinous, too enveloped and overwhelmed to work out one smell from the next. It was a warm blanket of aroma, comforting and welcoming. "Have you been sleeping well, Dunn?" "Well, no, not really." The shaman didn't reply. Dunn felt he had to fill the void, but his brain skittered to work out exactly what to say without sounding foolish. "I've been dreaming quite a bit. Every rest, usually several times each rest." And you've been remembering them all, in great detail.
Yes, how did you?
Getting more compelling, more vital?
Yes. Somewhere in the depths of the vent, Dunn could hear the ping of metal expanding. The shaman made a non-committal humming sound. When they first started, they were weird. On the inside of my head, noises and scents, but really vivid, quite random. Then there was this odd sensation, like tingling or prickling, waves of something, blankets, but maybe not, sometimes filling the whole of the inside of my head and hurting. I'm not describing this very well.
Those are called extrasensory factors.
Oh?
Things that you can't describe in sounds, touch, smell, taste, or air sense. It takes a while to get used to those, but you will. There's something that you won't really make a lot of, unfortunately. We don't know what they mean. They come in different types. Some foretellers have called them flavors. It helps to categorize them, but ultimately it's hard to tell what they might mean. Historically, foretellers tend to ignore them, to be honest.
Dunn was lost in his own thoughts in effort to take everything in. Barg filled the gap this time.
Have the dreams been getting more consistent, recurring?
I've been having one dream that has, yes.
What happens?
I'm running along one of the rivers, in a tunnel, and I'm being chased by something. A horrible something. It's hunting me. It won't give up, and it's gaining on me. But I can't smell it or air sense it. I just know it's coming. Almost, but not quite like I know what it's thinking. A horrible other thing.
The same every time?
Yes, well, starting the same every time, but it seems like there's some more each time. Like a story? Dunn had intended his tone to be rhetorical, but Barg answered.
Yes, like a story. Except this one may be real, and you may be in it.
Hey, I said that. Padge chipped in.
Thank you, Padge, his father replied. You have been listening all these years. It is a shame, though, that you've never had the foretelling gift.
Curse, more like.
Padge!
The shaman could crack his voice like a whip. Sorry, father. What do you mean, curse? Dunn asked, worried.
Some people find the responsibility that comes with the gift of foretelling too much for them.
That's the folks it doesn't drive bats.
Padge, that's quite enough. This is a serious discussion of a very serious matter. If you can't listen seriously, then go outside. Young Dunn here has the gift of foretelling whether he wants it or not. What matters now is that he understands it, and what he does with it.
Sorry. A distant clang echoed up the air vent with a sigh of acrid air. So, it is the future, then? I'm experiencing the future?
No, not exactly. Sometimes it may be the future. Sometimes it can be the past. Sometimes it is a foretelling from far away, neither your future or your past.
So what use is that to me, or to anyone?
That is for you to decide,
Berg said.
That is what makes the difference between a good foreteller and mad folk. That is the riddle that is foretelling.
So you can't tell me what my dream meant?
No, only you can know that. All I can say is that you do have the gift.
But this dream, he corrected himself, foretelling, seemed so real. And it's not happened to me yet, so it must be my future, mustn't it?
Each foretelling appears from the mind of someone there, sometimes many minds. All of that appears in your mind. It seems like it's come from you. That is a lot to take in for one day, my young friend. Go home and think about it. Return to me after the next rest, and we'll talk some more.
Dunn left the hut in a daze. Foretelling, multiple futures, madness, extrasensory whatever the hells they were. He already had more responsibility than ever he felt ready for, and now this? It was a long while before Dunn realized Padge was still there walking alongside him, and to be honest with himself, Dunn hadn't the first idea where he was going. He let his legs and the noisy current of folk carry him, while his conscious brain wasn't occupied with the task of directing him. The smell of Dodge's sweet food stall on the market hit him just before he hit it. "Done," Padge laughed. "Sorry, in another world there." Feeling guilty for dragging his friend halfway across the village, Dunn felt in his shoulder bag for some trade strips he knew still carried some credit. He could smell the sweet crackled dried mushrooms on the stand.
He asked for 2 handfuls and handed over the wooden trade strip. The sound of a few brief scratches followed as Dodge made tallies on it, before handing it back to Dunn. "Thanks." The friends walked on, munching side by side for a while. They tried to give the bowl in the center of the village, where auctions usually took place, a wide berth. The rowdy market that Dunn had heard earlier seemed to have descended into a full-blown row. The raised voices of bridge folk seemed to be interspersed with the nasal shrieks of a group of riverfolk traders. "You don't think that'll happen to me, do you?" Dunn said.
"What?"
Padge said.
"Foretelling? Sounds like it already has."
"No, not the foretelling or whatever it's called. The going mad."
"Don't know. Probably not."
Probably. That was reassuring. Well, he'd have to settle for that for now, while he worked out what exactly was going on inside his head. Until then, he was supposed to do chores. Mother would need him by now. It would be chaos there, though. The pups fighting, Mother shouting. It wasn't much better staying here, whatever the hells was going on today. He needed time alone to think. He said goodbye to Padge. Maybe another go at some fish? Dunn crept back through the rush door of the family home at Riverhole. It was eerily quiet. Maybe Mother had taken the little ones to creche in the village. It was about that time. He searched for his hunting bag. His mother had made it for his father, and Dunn felt awkward using it. The bag was a traditional folk-woven one from reeds, as opposed to the recent trends of making bags out of materials from found things. Dunn didn't have much to do with found things. Not particularly because of the inherent danger, or because of any traditionalist streak in him, but mostly because they were usually so damned expensive. The market traders and traveling visitors from the machine folk, who collected and sold found things, made plenty of trade tallies to offset the risks they took. But on the whole, Dunn didn't get it. For most problems, there was a folk-generated solution available, cheaper or free, and that suited him fine. He swung the bag over his shoulder and made for the passage that led from the family room down to the river. The texture of the bag in his hands was strangely comforting today. He could feel the cloud of fresh moisture many strides before he reached the river. The sensation was something he took for granted. It permeated the whole tribe's life, his family's especially, since of all the tribe they lived closest to it. Their home called Riverhole, due to a convenient tunnel to the bank. The noise of the water rose and fell with the seemingly random levels of the river. Quieter today, as it happened, but it was always there. He walked down to the edge of the water. There was the walkway along the edge of the river. He walked the familiar route to his favorite fishing place, underfoot the textured metal mesh lightly crunching with rust. Stopping at his usual place, just after the grill on the wall, he lay down on his belly, arm in the water, to wait. Patience was one of his strong points. He was always able to distract himself in one part of his brain, working out what he'd do next, planning ahead, while another part of him lay in wait, wired, and sprung to pounce. A swish in the water and a fish would be caught, stunned, and in his bag. That is, if a fish came along. He twitched his fingers. Funny, it seemed like he was having to reach farther down today to even reach the water. Ah well, everything today seemed like more effort. Maybe it was his attitude he should be focusing on. In the water, the blood, his hand, the pain. Something churning in the water. Angry, cold, alien. He snatched his hand out, sure to feel blood dripping down his arm, but no. His hand was fine, wet with water, but fine. He wiggled his fingers. What the hell was going on? His pulse hammered. The dreaming, foretelling again? While he was awake? He could scarcely cope with it every night. Would it be every night? Gods, he hoped not. He forced his breath slowly through his teeth. Whether or not he could stand it, he was starting to understand the folk who couldn't. When he was very young, there was someone from the village who had started behaving oddly. Beng? Or was it Teng? Dunn couldn't recall, but he could remember that the poor unfortunate became more and more strange and disassociated, talking to himself, arguing with absent demons. Eventually, you couldn't smell him in the village, and no one talked about him anymore. Now, Dunn knew why. He was beginning to imagine how this new gift could easily crack someone. The sleeplessness alone was enough to fray him at the edges. He slowly clenched and unclenched his hand. He had the gift, want it or not, and he was just going to have to cope. There was no one else. A cramp in his shoulder told Dunn how long he'd been there. It never normally took this much effort to find a catch. He moved his spot to somewhere farther upstream, a spot he liked less, but nearer the village bridge where the pipe turned. It was busier there. Dunn didn't like the disturbance. People going into the village, the noise of the market more obvious, but it was a sure place to catch something. He waited again. Slowly a chilling feeling crept up his insides. He carried on fishing, trying to quell it, but in the end, he had to let the obvious overwhelm him. No fish. There were no fish. There had always been fish. How could there not be? He sat back on his haunches, his head in his hands, trying to think. The family would be fine. There were mushrooms he could find if he wanted. But that wasn't the point. They'd be fine for now. All the bridge folk would be fine for now. But fish were an important part of what everyone had to eat. And then there was trade. Although the woven weed bags that the bridge folk produced were very fine, by far the most important trade good was the fish. And there was something else he couldn't put his finger on. A tickling in the back of his mind. Something important. He had all the fragments, but he couldn't make them into one piece. Something was terribly wrong. One of the elders in the village needed to know. Now. He went straight to the shaman's hut. All he heard when he got in earshot was the snick-snack of Padge whittling. Dunn could tell the noise of Padge's carving from 20 or 30 strides away. "Padge!"
"Hey, what's wrong? You're panting."
"Where's your father?"
"Some meeting of the elders in the moot hall. Why?"
Dunn grabbed Padge by his shoulder and pulled him up to standing. The sword spear he was working on fell to the floor with a clatter.
"Hells! Do you know how long those things take to sharpen?"
Dunn kept pulling. "Come on, we've got to go there, now." Padge stopped resisting and fell into an easy lope alongside Dunn.
"Why?"
"Fish!" Dunn shouted.
"Eh?"
"There's no fish in the river. None."
"Gods."
They slowed only as they reached the moot hall, a long, low building built like the rest of the village hut dwellings from reeds and mud. But this was the largest building in the village and had the added feature of double-skinned walls, stuffed on the inside with fur to damp down noise from inside and out. However, no amount of auditory dampening or protection was going to hide the raised voices heard when the friends arrived.
"Care how important this is. He's too young."
Padge grabbed Dunn and pulled him down into a crouch, just around the edge of the moot hall from its door.
"He's wise for his years. But not many of those."
"He's perfectly capable."
"Enough."
The voice of Arj, the village alpha, was heard loudly, and then more quietly he said,
"We have no choice. But we would be sending him to certain danger. Why can we not send a fully grown band of hunters? You know why, Gring. We, and only we of the Elders Moot, know of the other threat that faces us. We must act with that in mind."
"How goes the discussion with our river folk guest?" Dunn made out the odd, deep tones of Myrch, the Alpha's most recent advisor. "He still won't tell us what he was searching for." A female voice was Switch's, the head of the Hunters Guild. "Though clearly up to no good, poking through the bibliotheca." "All of our records and maps?" Myrch said.
"We have nothing to hide,"
Arj said. "You say that like it's a good thing," Myrch said. Both Padge and Dunn were lifted off their feet swiftly and silently, gripped by the scruff from behind. People who listen at doors get bent noses. The quiet, precise voice carried almost no scent. It could only be Switch, head of the Hunters Guild, and tutor to both Padge and Dunn in fighting and tracking and stalking food. Dunn and Padge in midair were still too stunned to reply. She had come out of nowhere like a wraith, without even disturbing the air. "Now, what should we do with a pair of ear-flapping vagabonds, eh?" Switch said, hauling them up effortlessly. "I think we'll let Arj decide what punishment is fitting." With that, she swirled them around the corner and kicked the door to the moot hall deftly, so it swung inward. "Friends, elders, our meeting is adjourned. I have found some skulkers at the door jamb. What punishment do we deem fit?"
"Ah,"
the Alpha said when the scent of Dun and Padge quickly followed them into the hut.
"I suspect what we have to say to these young rogues may be punishment enough."
Chapter 3. "But the fish—" Dun tried not to stutter.
"Pardon."
"Fish." Facing the Alpha, it was all Dun could muster. So far his day had not worked out at all how he'd planned.
"I think for all concerned here, you'll need to be just a little clearer."
"Gone. They're all gone."
"The fish."
Arj, despite winning his role as village alpha in combat, had spent many years in his position perfecting his diplomacy and forbearance against what some would consider extreme odds. "Yes."
"Ah."
The low muttering next to Arj was Myrch, the advisor, but it was too quiet for Dun to hear.
"That is worrying. We will investigate the matter of the fish in due course. We're glad you came, Dun. We wanted to talk to you about another matter."
He paused.
"There's something you can do for us, for everyone."
"Me?"
"Yes," Arj replied simply. "It has come to our attention that some old neighbors of ours, the machine folk, have gone very quiet. They are not near neighbors, they live far upstream, but we have not had a whisker twitch of them for some time."
Dun and Padge listened intently, but still weren't sure where they might come into it themselves. After all, they were the first to realize that in terms of the tribe, they were very small reeds in a very big basket.
"We usually meet them once a cycle at the tribe's moot fair," the Alpha continued. "They have occasionally missed a cycle. Some tribes do sometimes. It isn't unusual. However, they send traders here all the time, but no one has bumped into any of them for nearly an eon, and now pieces of found tech are making their way here, brought by river folk. That is troubling."
Dun twitched. From his tone, what the Alpha said was true. But equally, there was something he wasn't saying. He tried to think of what he knew of the machine folk. They came to the tribe moots, of course, bringing some kind of clever mechanical toy, or more often, beautiful and useful pieces of rare metal. There were rumors about them being the custodians of wonderful machines. They could predict the future, could read your mind, that kind of thing and more. Dun was starting to realize that most of what he knew was conjecture and rumor. That was going to be of little help to him. Dun furrowed his brow. Not enough to go on.
"The tribe needs to send a small hunting party to check that all is well. We have chosen you, Dun, to fulfill this task, and you must choose who will go with you. Also, you must decide what provisions and equipment you need to fulfill your task. This will be provided by the tribe. Consider this wisely. Tonight there is a feasting for old Greer. He has hung up his hunting spear this cycle, and it is time to celebrate his victories. Tomorrow we will talk again. Until then, you must speak of this to no one."
"But why choose me? There are plenty of older, smarter, tougher folk than me," Dun said.
"There are. It is you we have chosen nonetheless."
Again, there was more that Arj wasn't saying, but his tone brooked no argument. "Mother and the little ones, who will take care of them, since father—"
"The tribe will keep your people safe, rest assured, young Dun."
"May I go and think about it? It's a lot."
"We would expect no less."
"It's a lot." He didn't finish his sentence in the tent. He didn't finish it as he stumbled outside. He couldn't finish it later as he wandered through the village. There was just a lot. A lot in his head. A lot of fear about what he was getting into. A lot he didn't know, and that frightened him most of all. There were many, many pieces to this puzzle, and he only had one or two. He felt like he was walking straight into the jaws of some horrible cave-hunting predator. Something that sat with its jaws wide open and waited till someone was right on its tongue, and then a pain seared through Dunn's leg. Padge was laughing. "Ow! What was that for?"
"Well, you've been such great company today, I had to entertain myself somehow."
"Ow!" Dunn said again, more quietly this time. He sat and rubbed his shin.
"So?"
Padge said, half question, half statement. "So?" Padge left a gap in the conversation that a cart could have been pulled through. Then, as Dunn was drawing breath to reply, he said as quickly as he could,
"So are you going to take me with you on this stupid errand, or what?"
"Oh, that."
"Oh, yes, of course that. What have you been brooding about but not talking to me about, for gods know how long?"
"Sorry," Dunn said, back-footed. "I didn't know if you'd want to."
The biggest adventure of either of our lives, and you're not sure if I'd want to. Did it ever occur to you that you need to take someone to prevent you getting your miserable hide eaten or lost?"
"Well, yes."
"And so?"
"So?"
"You still haven't asked me."
"Oh, sorry. Will you come with me?"
"I might be busy."
Dunn sprung on Padge, shouting, "Ratbag!" and they rolled over the ground, crashing into a fence and earning a stern "Hey!" from its owner. The play fight lasted some time, until Padge got the better of his old friend and sat astride his neck. Dunn tapped his leg in a gesture of defeat. They sat on the ground, panting. "You know it's going to be really dangerous," Dunn said.
"Yes,"
Padge replied. "No, I mean really dangerous."
"Come on,"
Padge said.
"Let's work while we talk. I know a secret Myconid folk cave, a good walk from here. No one goes there. There are good pickings, and it means you're not going to go back empty-handed to your mother if there's no fish."
"Ever the practical one, eh?"
"I just know your mother. She scares me."
So the friends walked and talked, keeping air senses open for anyone else near, but Padge's cave, just as he'd said, was some way from the village. The passage was accessed by squeezing through a damaged grating at floor level, just large enough for the two friends. Padge was right, a full-grown adult would not fit. Sometime after all sound of the village and the river had died away, Dunn began again. "I don't think I'm explaining this well. By dangerous, I mean endangering the whole tribe dangerous. More, if that were possible."
"How do you know? The dreams?"
"Not the dreams exactly. At least, not what's in them. It's just a feeling I get when I'm in the dream. And now, when I'm awake, too."
"What kind of dangerous? You know I wouldn't let you go alone. Death doesn't bother me. I've been trained as a hunter. So have you."
"Not death. At least, not just death. Worse than that, somehow. It's really not that clear in the dreams."
"Great. Already I'm not enjoying the role of Foreseer's companion. You get to scare the hairs off me and then say, 'Oh, it's really not that clear, just worse than death?' Great."
"Listen, I'm not very good at this yet. I'm just saying I hope you know what you're agreeing to before you get too far in."
"You haven't really agreed yourself yet, from what I remember in the moot hall,"
Padge reminded Dunn. "True, but I think I have to. You've got a choice."
"Not if you're going."
And so it was decided. The first two members of the party to hunt and find the machine folk sat in the warmth of the moot hall and listened to the village skald, Iban, sing the ballad of Yara and Jaris. No one knew how old the song was, but it was old indeed. They'd heard its strains scores of times since being small. It was a favorite at festivals and feasts, but somehow this time there was a new romance to it, a frisson of knowing that they were on the verge of the kind of journey that was worthy of a song. In the place of long ago, outside the egg upon its back, Yara looked upon the deep, and her shimmered hair was black. Resplendent in the void and deep, and her shimmered hair was black. Jairus came and warmed her heart, he came to her along the track, came from the deep and warmed her heart, he came to her along the track.
They loved as one an eon's breadth, and half was warm and half was black. They loved as none before her since, and half was warm and half was black. And then no one came in between, she felt her heart begin to crack. The darkest face came in between, she felt her heart begin to crack. Then he was gone and never seen, and none was warm and all was black. He faded, went, and never seen, and none was warm and all was black. Then we climbed back inside the egg, how long to wait till he came back? Returned ourselves inside the egg, how long to wait till he came back?
Dunn heard no more of the ballad that night, as the strain overtook him and he slept. Padge hadn't the heart to wake him. Chapter 4. Dunn's family had always been unusual in that they didn't live in a hut. Riverhole comprised 2 dirt-floored rooms near a short tunnel which led to the pipe and the river. Why they had wound up there, Dunn didn't know. He supposed there might have been a story if he pestered his mother, but he couldn't bring himself to. She still seemed lost in her own world. Living there certainly had its perks. Besides the obvious benefit of being so close to the river, something the family had always made the most of, there were odd storage compartments on the walls and nooks and crannies for the children to play in. The floor beneath them was always strangely warm, but without an air vent. Not a huge difference, but noticeable when you went outside. Beneath a covering of packed soil in their rooms, the base floor was metal. Dunn had dug down in a corner one day as a child. Mother and father must have moved the earth in from elsewhere to make things more comfortable. Thinking about it now, their home had so many advantages. It was strange that an elder didn't live there. They must have done something to be allowed to live there. Dunn started to think life was turning out like the floor in their house. Scratched the surface a little, and something odd laid not that far below.
"Oi, Dozy!"
Padge shouted at the rush door, rattling the door in its frame.
"Oh, sorry,"
Dunn said.
"Rough sleep?"
"No, not too bad," Dunn began absently.
"Good. Let's go back to our hut,"
Padge said.
"Father's not in. He's off having another elders' meeting. We need to plan."
Dunn grabbed his bag, and off they went. On the way through the village, passing the edge of the market stalls, Padge piped up.
"If I'm providing the venue, you're providing the provisions."
"Sounds fair." Dunn dug out his tally sticks and bought 2 cups of burnt-smelling, bitter-dry rakta in wooden cups from one vendor and 2 handfuls of sweet crackle from Dodge. The middle of the village was oddly quiet. A hiatus after something? He was clearly thinking too hard. Dunn shook his head, and they went back to the hut. Padge sat Dunn down on a log, then rustled off into distant corners, searching for who knew what. After a few moments and a grunt of satisfaction, he returned to the log and prodded a stylus and a bark roll into Dunn's hands. "What's this?" Dunn said.
"List,"
Padge replied, with that tone of certainty that previous times even Dunn had found annoying. Oddly this time, Dunn found it comforting. More than that, he had a creeping suspicion the traits in question could just save their lives.
"Check these off."
"Go ahead."
"Firstly, weapons. Me."
The low scraping of stylus on bark filled the tent. "You?" Dunn asked, slightly too surprised.
"Yes,"
Padge returned.
"Even Orson the Maker said my stuff is really good now. I can carve a sword spear that flies true, make pipe darts, knives, bolas. I've been collecting stuff."
"Stockpiling? Whatever for?"
"I was going to start trading them, but it seems like they've got a different fate now. I've got knives and a stack of sword spears that I'm really pleased with. I spent ages foraging the plants for them, but I found this odd group of plants way out toward where the Myconid folk live. Took me ages to get them, but they're rock hard and sharpen up really well. There's a bit more weight to them, too, so they fly really good."
"Wow," Dunn said. "What's next year? Food.
Food. We've got to guess this, but say 12 spans there and 12 back. Allows 6 spans to explore.
30 spans, that was a whole cycle. The scale of this whole undertaking was slowly sinking in for Dunn, and it was one of the many things he wasn't comfortable with. Padge continued his train of thought.
We probably want something we can eat easily, something we don't have to cook, and that doesn't weigh much. Dried mushrooms, caked fish, that kind of thing. We might find fresh stuff on the way, but we can't count on that.
And there's no fish, Dunn reminded.
Okay, true. Next, bedrolls.
Dunn said, I can get us some from home. We've always got spares. Mother weaves them when she's bored.
And some packs with shoulder straps,
Padge said.
All this stuff won't carry in just bags. That'll be too much. Plus it keeps our hands free should we need to fight.
Who in the gods would we fight? Dunn tried to hide the rising tension in his voice.
Dunno. Bandits, maybe. It has been known. There are supposed to be big arachnoids in the deepest caves. Not that I know anyone who's met one. And then there's whatever the hell's that thing in your dream is. That hardly seems friendly, does it?
No, Dunn swallowed. I don't suppose it is. After a pause, Padge went on.
What else? Rope. We'll need to go to the Weavers for that. Is her Aunt Danya still the Weavers Guild leader?
Yes, she'll recommend us something good. She may have backpacks, too.
Clicker beetle and grubs for timekeeping. Got those back here somewhere,
Padge said. There was a scratch as Dunn ticked the scroll. Healing stuff from the midwives.
We should probably pay them a visit. There may be things we've not thought of.
Padge.
What?
There's been something bothering me this morning, Dunn began hesitantly.
Well, if it's about supplies or equipment, I thought we were going out now to collect the last bits we need, and then sleep on any final forgets, and pick them up before we leave next span.
No, it's not that. I think we're on top of most things, and between us, I think we know what we need later. No, I had another dream last night.
Oh, good, more doom. I was beginning to miss that.
No, not doom this time. More a feeling.
Go on.
Well, this is going to sound odd, but we were in a particularly dull part of our journey. Sometime soon, plodding along. I wasn't sure exactly where we were, or even what our surroundings were.
Sounds like one of your foretellings. I'm beginning to enjoy their particular, non-specific, not all that helpful nature.
Dunn ignored the jibe and continued. But one thing I was sure of. There weren't just the two of us.
What? We were being followed? Didn't you cover that part of the foretelling in the bit about the slavering monster?
No, it wasn't that at all. There was someone else in our party. Someone with us, Padge. I think we need to find someone else.
Oh,
Padge said, a bit floored.
I know Father's already said this to you or something like, but you know not to take all of this too seriously, right? I mean, some of the things you dream might not be our future, or yours. Some of the possibilities don't come true because of your choices, all that kind of thing. Because if you do take it too seriously, pretty soon you can't take a pee without having dreamed about it first.
No, I know, Dunn giggled, the tension released. I was just saying, is all. I guess it just feels like an unanswered question.
Come on, let's go find some questions we can answer. To the midwives, Padge said.
Chapter 5. Midwives in the tribes were respected, and a prestigious high-status path to take that males and females sought to pursue it in equal measure. Along with the expected duties of delivering the young and caring for the mothers of the tribe, the role in the tribe had spread to cover all of the healing too, except where the spiritual requirements overlapped the shaman's work. The swirling smells of the garden made detecting people outside almost impossible, and varying levels of noise in the large series of huts that made up the infirmary meant listening wasn't always an option, so there was a bell hung from the door of the nearest hut to the village. It was a large piece of metal, beaten by the village maker into an instrument that would bong satisfactorily when hit with the mushroom wood beater that hung below it. Padge stepped up and bonged. The two stood and waited for the last harmonics to die away before the hut door creaked open. They heard someone puffing behind it, an apprentice presumably.
"Sari is very busy today supervising making salves. What do you want?"
the apprentice said in a too proud manner. Padge had recognized Porf from the puffing before the door opened. Although worst in all their classes at fighting or hunting, Porf had shown a gift for the healer's arts, and he knew it.
"What we want,"
Padge started, deliberately,
"is to be taken to your guild leader, Porf. We've got tribe business, and you'd do well to be quick about it."
"Wait here, then," Porf said stiffly. "I'll go and get her."
"He asked for that,"
Dunn said, once Porf had puffed out of earshot.
"He's been asking for it for a long, long while."
"Are you all right?" Dunn asked.
"I'm fine. Just have my head filled up with details, and I want to get going now."
"Yes, I know how you feel. I want to be on our way already, but I don't want to miss anything out."
"That might potentially kill us,"
Padge finished. "I wasn't going to be that blunt," Dunn said.
"Ah, but that's why you've got me along."
"Dunn and Padge, I presume." The voice of Sari, head of the Midwives' Guild, cut through their merriment, along with a waft of something floral and astringent smelling which clung to her robes. Whatever it was she was supervising the making of, it smelled like powerful stuff. "I heard from Arj you might be visiting. What can I do for you?" "We need you to send us off with everything we should be taking on a journey," Dunn said. His answer from Sari was a bell peal of laughter. "If I sent you out with everything possible, you would hardly be able to walk." "It's just, I've never really done this before," Dunn began in explanation. "Don't worry, Dunn," Sari said in a warm but gently mocking voice. "We'll sort you out with an emergency kit. We make them quite often for travelers and traders. It should have most things in that you'll need. I think we have one ready made up here somewhere." She clapped her hands twice. From somewhere nearby, the apprentice shuffled into the room. "Good, Porf. Go back to the workshop and under my bench. There should be an emergency kit already. If there is, bring it here. Hurry now." And off he scuttled, returning with a rustling bundle that Sari unrolled on the floor in front of Dunn and Padge, inviting them to sit and get acquainted with what was in the bundle. "These are vials of wound heal," she began, passing the small stoppered bottles to Dunn and Padge in turn. "Please open them, smell, get familiar with the texture." They did, and it answered the question about what it was that clung to her robes. "I must ask you to try and return all the empty bottles to us. They are found things, you know, and so hard to come by. This powder," she passed them a bag as she talked, "is a fever cure. It does not work on all diseases, but it does help your own body fight off many things." She paused, searching out her next item. "These leaves from river thistle help stave off sleep. These from jad in the wall help promote it. And the paste in this bag is a blood cleanser. If you become poisoned or bitten by something unclean, this will slow the poison and allow you a chance to heal." She waited while their quickest of lessons sank in. "You understand what you have? There are bandages and pads in there, too." Yes," Dunn said. "Thank you." "You're both welcome. I wish you a good journey, and my best hope is that you need none of it."
"Ours, too,"
Padge said. "Oh, one more thing, if we may?" Dunn asked. "Yes. You wouldn't by any chance have someone that wants to come along with us, would you?" Again that laugh from Sari. "It would be an interesting outing for an apprentice, I think. Sadly, we have no one to spare. You might try the Alchemists' Guild. You may have more luck there," Sari said, and went back inside.
"Right," Padge said. "Alchemists, then."
The Alchemists' Guild was as far upstream of the village as it was possible to go. Dunn and Padge could tell their proximity to it by two signs. Firstly, the sulfur and carbon smell was unmistakable, and secondly, there was a high earth bank all the way around. The only entrance through this protective levee was riverside, down a small path. They could hear a classroom-style recitation, the echoes of call and response drifting out to them through the door of the large building.
"Metal, earth, air, and blood,"
As was traditional, on the right-hand side of the front door was an announcing post. The alchemist's front door was no different. It usually featured a symbol of the house, hung, carved, or in relief, and some kind of noise-making device. Dunn felt for a string, and found a complicated six-pointed star tied to a long piece of river string. Dunn tweaked the string. A loud, glassy tinkling noise came from farther up the post. The string, it seemed, was tied to some of those glass tubes the alchemists seemed so fond of using. Metal, earth, air, and blood. The door creaked open with a whiff of sulphur and a sniffling noise. "Hello, can I help you?" The small voice attached to the sniffle inquired. Dunn formulated a reply carefully in his head. He knew Tali, and quite liked her. "Only if you could hurry," Tali said. "I've kind of left a beaker on the heater, and it's a bit finely balanced, and, you know." There was a faint tinkle from inside. "Oh." Then a crump, felt more than heard. "Oh, shreds." The whoomp that followed ripped the door off its post and through it. Dunn caught the door full in the face, and Padge caught Tali. They lay on the floor in that hiatus that follows an explosion. Dust, debris, and the alchemist's door chimes fell all around them.
"Nice,"
Padge said, coughing.
"Yeah,"
Tali said.
"Can you, you're leaning on my—"
"Oh, sorry," Padge said. Tali stood, brushing off debris. Dunn rolled himself out from under the door.
"I, don't suppose your master is in, is he?"
"Oh, gods," Tali said.
"You know, I kind of thought I might avoid him for a span or two."
"Avoid whom?" came a deep voice. From Dunn's air sense, he could tell that the person speaking virtually filled the doorway in each direction. The smell of rust and sulphur hung with the question.
"We need to talk to him now,"
Padge hissed to Tali.
"Dunn here has something important to ask him."
"Okay," Tali said.
"There'd better be a good excuse for this. A very good excuse,"
Gatrin said in a voice not used to contradiction.
"Can we borrow an alchemist?"
Padge said cheerfully.
"Borrow,"
Gatrin said sternly.
"An alchemist is not a piece of laboratory equipment. An alembic to be returned once washed."
"Rather," Dunn backtracked. "Can we ask your permission to let someone come with us on—" He stopped, not sure how to carry on without saying too much. "That is, we've been asked by the Alpha to go—"
"Exploring,"
Padge butted in.
"We've got the village map to update."
"How interesting," Gatrin said suspiciously. "And you need an alchemist, why?" "Well, for making—" Dunn struggled.
"Paper,"
Padge said.
"Spare, you know, paper."
The sound of dragging furniture and sweeping of glass came from within.
"Can you take this one?"
Gatrin said.
"This?" "Alchemist. Despite Tali falling behind in her studies by trotting off on some scribe's errand that could equally well be done by traders, she might learn something at that. And we might all appreciate the calm around here for a while. You'd like to go?"
"Great," she said, a little too brightly, then a little more levelly. "With your permission, Master Gatrin, I'd like to go."
"Well, if that's all the disturbance, for now, I've got a class to finish. I'm sure you three have much to discuss."
"Thank you, Master Gatrin," Tali said. Then, as he left, over his shoulder, he added,
"Oh, and do try and bring Tali."